courtroom fell silent before anyone understood why. It wasn't the judge's entrance. It wasn't the cameras. It wasn't even the defendant. It was the tension, thick, electric, like the air knew something the people didn't. Judge Adrian Hale stepped onto the bench with the calm authority of a man who had never been surprised by anything. 32 years in law. A reputation for ruthless fairness. Praised by conservatives for order. Celebrated by liberals for integrity. He had one rule: emotion stays outside the courtroom. Today would test whether that rule had ever been true. The defendant sat alone at the table. Malcolm Reyes, 25 years old, charged with attempted murder of a police officer. The officer sat across the aisle, arm in a sling, jaw tight with contained fury. The media called it clear-cut. A violent suspect lunged during a stop. Officer defended himself, hero narrative. Except the video circulating online didn't feel clear-cut. Some saw a dangerous criminal. Others saw a young man being handled differently than others would have been. The city had been arguing for weeks. Now, it was Judge Hale's problem. Malcolm didn't look violent. That unsettled people. He watched everything quietly, eyes moving with precise awareness. Not nervous, not defiant. Observing. Like he'd been here before. The prosecutor rose first, voice sharp. This case is about accountability. An officer performing his duty was attacked. The defendant resisted lawful orders and escalated the situation. Images flashed on screen, body cam footage, shaky, blurred moments, a sudden movement, then chaos. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The officer winced slightly as his injury was described. The narrative felt airtight. Until the defense stood. A woman in her 40s, voice calm but dangerous. This case is not about whether force happened. It is about why. She paused just long enough to fracture certainty. She showed another clip. Security camera from a nearby storefront. No sound, different angle, longer timeline. Before the struggle. The officer approached Malcolm differently than he approached others. Closer, more aggressive posture. Hand already near weapon. Some jurors leaned forward. Curiosity began replacing certainty. Judge Hale watched without expression, but his fingers tapped once against the bench. The defense continued. Malcolm Reyes was stopped because he matched a description. We will show that description changed 3 times in the arrest report. Murmurs. The prosecutor objected. Sustained. Momentum paused. Then Malcolm stood. He wasn't supposed to speak yet, but he did. Your Honor, I know you don't remember me. The room froze. Judge Hale's eyes sharpened. I advise you to consult your counsel before speaking. Malcolm swallowed. My mother said you wouldn't recognize me. The courtroom inhaled collectively. Somewhere, a camera shutter clicked too loudly. The judge felt something twist in his chest. Not recognition, not yet. Just discomfort. The defense attorney looked like she had been waiting for this moment. She approached slowly. Your Honor, the defense moves to introduce sealed documentation relevant to potential judicial conflict. The prosecutor protested immediately. The judge hesitated. Conflict of interest was nuclear. Granting this could derail the entire trial, but refusing it might look worse. He allowed it. The folder was thin, old, edges worn. Inside, a photograph. Young Adrian Hale, not yet a judge, standing in front of a legal aid clinic. Beside him, a Latina woman holding a newborn. His breath caught. He remembered her. Elena Reyes, law student, activist, brilliant. They had argued about justice late into the night. She believed the system was built on bias. He believed it could be fixed from inside. They loved each other fiercely, until ambition won. He left for a clerkship across the country. She disappeared from his life. He never knew she was pregnant. The DNA results confirmed it. Malcolm Reyes was his son. The room didn't know yet, but the judge did. And suddenly, every movement felt heavy. Every word carried weight beyond law. The prosecutor sensed the shift. "Your Honor?" He straightened, professional mask sliding back into place. "We will proceed." The defense watched him carefully. The power dynamic had changed, not publicly, but irreversibly. Testimony continued. Witnesses described the scene. Some said Malcolm resisted. Others said the officer escalated too quickly. A woman testified she heard the officer use a phrase that sounded like a slur. No audio confirmed it. The officer took the stand, confident, disciplined. He described fear, split-second decision-making. "I saw his hand move toward his waistband. I reacted." The defense asked quietly, "Did you know the suspect had already complied with prior instructions?" "Yes." "And you still approached with weapon partially drawn?" "Yes." "Because?" Pause. "Experience." The word hung in the air. Experience. Another word for bias, depending on who you asked. Judge Hale listened. Inside, something cracked. He had sentenced hundreds of young men like Malcolm, believing neutrality protected fairness. Now, neutrality felt different, more complicated, more personal. During a recess, he sat alone in chambers. The photograph stared back at him. His son, raised without him, standing trial in his courtroom, accused of violence against the authority he represented. The irony felt almost cruel. He could recuse himself. He should recuse himself. But part of him knew, if he stepped down now, the narrative would become blood over law. And maybe he needed to see this through. Back in court, a final piece of evidence surfaced, recovered audio from a nearby parked car. Faint, distorted, but clear enough. The officer's voice, "Don't make me treat you like the others." Silence. Then Malcolm's voice, "What others?" The room shifted instantly. Meaning exploded into interpretation. Was it racial? Was it procedural? Was it stress talking? Debate ignited before the judge even spoke. Closing arguments felt like war. Prosecution, order must survive. Defense, justice must examine itself. The jury deliberated for 12 hours. The verdict arrived at sunset. Not guilty of attempted murder, guilty of resisting arrest. A split outcome. No one fully satisfied, no one fully outraged. Judge Hale delivered sentencing, voice steady, hands still. But inside, he wasn't the same man who entered that morning. When the session ended, Malcolm approached slowly. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. "You knew?" Malcolm asked quietly. "Yes." "Did it change anything?" The judge hesitated. "I hope it made me more careful." Malcolm nodded, not angry, not relieved, just tired. Weeks later, the city continued arguing. Some claimed justice prevailed. Others said the system protected itself. Judge Hale received a letter. No return address. Inside was another DNA report, another name, another child, and a note. "You thought you only abandoned one." He stared at it for a long time, because if that was true, then this wasn't one case. It was a pattern. And the next trial on his docket involved a prosecutor who had been present that night at the legal aid clinic decades ago. Watching. Waiting. Tell me something. If justice only becomes complicated when it becomes personal, was it ever truly neutral? And if you were the judge, would you have stepped down? Or would you have stayed and carried the weight? Because the next truth isn't just about family. It's about the system choosing who gets to be seen and who never gets recognized at all. The letter did not shake in his hands. That disturbed him more than if it had. Judge Adrian Hale had always believed control was proof of clarity. If your pulse stayed steady, your judgment stayed clean. But that night, alone in his chambers long after the staff had gone home, He read the DNA report 3 times. Name, Gabriel Soto. Age, 19. Status, incarcerated. Charge, felony armed robbery. Facility, state correctional intake. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. He leaned back as slowly. Another son, another life shaped in the shadow of his ambition. And the timing was surgical. Because Gabriel Soto's appeal had just landed on his docket that morning. The system had placed his second son directly under his authority. And no one had said a word. Or maybe someone had. He thought about the prosecutor from Malcolm's case, Evelyn Cross, sharp, controlled, unsettlingly observant. She had watched him closely when the adoption file surfaced, not surprised, not shocked, studying him, as if she had been waiting for something to crack. The next morning, the courtroom felt different. News of Malcolm's paternity had leaked overnight. The headlines were merciless. Judge presides over son's trial. Conflict or coincidence? Justice or bloodline bias? Commentators debated his integrity. Activists demanded recusal from future cases involving law enforcement. Police unions accused him of soft sentencing. He walked through it all untouched, at least on the surface. Then, Gabriel Soto was brought in, smaller than Malcolm, younger, angrier. He didn't look at the judge with curiosity. He looked at him with contempt. Good, Hale thought. That means he knows. The defense argued wrongful conviction. Surveillance footage from the convenience store robbery had been grainy. The weapon never recovered. Identification based primarily on height and build. The prosecutor? Evelyn Cross. Of course, she rose with deliberate calm. This defendant was identified by 2 witnesses and apprehended 3 blocks from the scene. Flight suggests consciousness of guilt. Gabriel laughed softly. "You don't even know me," he muttered. Hale felt it in his spine. The defense requested reconsideration based on newly submitted DNA evidence suggesting familial conflict of interest. Gasps rippled again. This time, the room knew exactly what it meant. Hale did not reach for the envelope immediately. He already knew. He could recuse. He should recuse. But something colder had begun forming inside him, a realization. This was no coincidence. 2 sons, 2 criminal cases, both assigned to him, both prosecuted by the same woman. He looked at Evelyn Cross. She met his gaze evenly, unflinching. After recess, he summoned her privately. "In chambers." She closed the door behind her. "You knew," he said. "Yes." "How long?" "Long enough." "Why?" She studied him like a case file. "Because your story is the story of this courthouse." He didn't respond. She continued. "You rose through this system preaching neutrality. You built a legacy on objectivity. But objectivity has blind spots, Judge. You never had to experience them. And this is your experiment?" His voice was calm, but sharpened. "This is exposure." She slid a thin folder across the desk. Inside were old documents, legal aid clinic rosters, scholarship committee notes, letters of recommendation. He recognized the signatures, judges, senators, donors, names that had once shaped his future. And beneath them, an internal memo from decades ago. Candidate Hale shows exceptional promise. Advised distancing from activist affiliations to preserve judicial viability. Activist affiliations. Elena Reyes. Another note attached. Elena Reyes currently pregnant. Situation may complicate trajectory. The ink felt heavier than paper should. "They knew," he said quietly. "Yes," Evelyn replied. "They made sure your path stayed clean." "And my children?" "They were collateral." Silence stretched between them. "You orchestrated their cases." "I ensured they weren't buried," she corrected. "Without visibility, they would have taken plea deals. Disappeared." His jaw tightened. "So you dragged them into my courtroom?" I forced you to see what the system does when your last name isn't attached. That hit harder than accusation, because it was true. He had sentenced young men based on files that looked identical to Gabriel's. Grainy footage, witness certainty, prosecutorial confidence. He had trusted the structure. Now the structure felt curated. Back in open court, Gabriel refused to look at him. When asked if he understood the appeal process, he said, "I understand I was broke and scared and in the wrong neighborhood." The defense presented new analysis. The witness identification was inconsistent. One described the suspect as having a neck tattoo. Gabriel had none. The other had changed height estimates twice. The prosecutor countered, "Memory under stress is imperfect. That does not make it false." True, but imperfect memory had built entire prison populations. Hale's mind replayed Malcolm's trial. "Don't make me treat you like the others." The phrase echoed differently now. Who were the others? Men without fathers in courtrooms. Men without resources. Men without someone powerful forced to look at them as human. He felt the weight of every past sentence pressing inward. Gabriel finally spoke directly to him. "You ever think about where we ended up?" The courtroom stiffened. "You ever think maybe we were always going to land here?" There was no anger in his voice, just inevitability. That was worse. Hale could recuse at that moment, step down, protect what remained of his reputation. But walking away would mean returning to abstraction, returning to comfortable distance. Instead, he did something no one expected. He ordered a full evidentiary review, not just of Gabriel's case, but of every conviction tied to that arresting officer's unit over the past 5 years. The courtroom erupted. The prosecutor objected. Police union representatives stood in protest. Hale's voice cut through the noise. If this court failed to see bias before, it will not fail again. Evelyn Cross did not object a second time. She watched him, measuring. Days later, patterns emerged. Same officer, same vague descriptions, same neighborhoods, same quick identifications, convictions built on repetition. Gabriel's conviction was overturned, not because he was proven innocent beyond doubt, but because doubt had finally been allowed to breathe. Outside the courthouse, the city fractured again. Some called Hale courageous, others called him compromised, emotionally hijacked. Malcolm appeared at the courthouse steps that afternoon. Gabriel stood beside him. 2 young men shaped by absence, 2 men who had grown inside a system their father helped strengthen. Reporters shouted questions. "Judge Hale, are you acting as a father or as a jurist?" He paused. The cameras leaned in. "I am acting as a man who finally understands the cost of pretending those are separate." The statement exploded across media. Some applauded, some demanded impeachment. That night, alone again, he looked at both DNA reports side by side. 2 sons, 2 mirrors, and possibly more. His phone buzzed, unknown number, a text. There's a third. No name, no attachment, just coordinates, an address across town. He stared at it for a long time, because this was no longer about guilt or innocence. It was about architecture. Who designs a system where power insulates itself? Who benefits when certain children are invisible? And if he had not been forced to look, how many more verdicts would have passed under the illusion of fairness? Tell me something. If exposure is the only thing that forces justice to evolve, does that mean justice was never stable to begin with? And if the third child is real, what do you think that child wants? Revenge, recognition, or something far more dangerous? Reform? Because the next knock on his door won't be from a defendant. It will be from history. The address led to a part of the city Judge Adrian Hale had only ever seen from case files. Industrial. Underfunded, redlined decades ago, and never allowed to recover. He didn't bring security. He didn't bring media. For the first time in his adult life, he went somewhere without authority wrapped around him. The building was a converted warehouse with a painted sign, Community Legal Archive, Know Your Rights inside, folding tables, filing cabinets, volunteers scanning documents into aging computers. On the far wall, a projector displayed mugshots, dozens of them. Young men, young women, mostly black, mostly Latino. Under each photo, arresting officer name, charges, outcome, patterns highlighted in red. A woman stepped forward, mid-30s, controlled, familiar eyes. Not Malcolm's restraint, not Gabriel's anger, something sharper. "You came alone," she said. "Yes." "You don't even know if this is safe." He held her gaze. "I don't think I'm the one who should feel unsafe." A flicker of something crossed her face. Not a smile. Recognition. "My name is Asha Coleman," she said. He waited. She didn't offer it dramatically, didn't build suspense, just placed it in the air. "My mother was Talia Coleman. You clerked with her during your first appellate year." The memory struck slowly. Talia Coleman. Brilliant public defender, radical in tone, feared in cross-examination. They had worked late nights together reviewing wrongful conviction appeals. They had argued constantly. She once told him, "You want to fix the system. I want to survive it." He hadn't seen her after his judicial appointment. "She died," Asha said calmly. Stress-induced aneurysm. After losing a case tied to that same police unit you just ordered reviewed. The weight shifted. "And you think I'm responsible?" "I think you were protected." That word again. Protected. Asha walked him toward the wall of faces. "This is the third child." He frowned slightly. "There is no third biological child." "No," she said. "There's a generational one." She pointed to the projector. "These are the children your ruling shaped, some guilty, some not, all processed through a machine you believed was neutral." He didn't interrupt. "You were the model judge, the balanced one, the one prosecutors trusted. That trust became leverage." Her voice didn't rise. That made it worse. "When your sons entered the system, you saw fractures. We've been staring at them for decades." He looked at the screen again. He recognized case numbers. He recognized his own signature on sentencing documents. Years of decisions, now reframed. "Why the text?" he asked quietly. "Because reform without exposure becomes reputation management." She handed him a tablet. On it, internal emails, recently leaked, from within the district attorney's office. Subject lines, "Maintain Judge Hale assignment." "Favorable sentencing patterns." "Strategic case routing." He read slowly. Prosecutors had been deliberately steering certain borderline cases into his courtroom, not because he was harsh, because he was predictable, statistically consistent, less likely to suppress evidence on procedural grounds, less likely to question officer credibility unless overt misconduct was proven, neutral, reliable. He had been the anchor point, the stable center of a system that learned how to orbit him. Evelyn Cross's name appeared in several chains, not as architect, as dissenter. He looked up. "You forced those cases into my courtroom." "Yes, to expose me, to expose the structure." Silence settled heavy between them. "You could destroy my career with this." Asha didn't blink. Careers recover. Trust doesn't. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. For a moment, he imagined every past defendant standing in this warehouse, watching him read, waiting to see if he would retreat back into comfort. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Independent review board, subpoena power, full transparency on case routing, and a public admission." "Of what?" "That neutrality can be weaponized." That phrase lingered. Neutrality can be weaponized. Back at the courthouse the next morning, cameras lined the entrance again. Rumors had spread about the warehouse visit. Inside, the Judicial Oversight Committee had convened. Allegations of bias, conflict of interest, procedural impropriety. He stood before them without notes. "For years," he began, voice steady, "I believed impartiality meant distance. I now understand distance can become blindness." Murmurs. "I have discovered patterns in case assignments that suggest strategic routing to my courtroom based on perceived predictability." A committee member interrupted. "Are you alleging prosecutorial manipulation?" "I am stating documented correspondence indicates awareness of my statistical tendencies." "And your sons?" "My sons forced me to look. They did not create the pattern." He could feel his legacy unraveling in real time. Every award, every citation, every speech about fairness, reinterpreted. "I am requesting the formation of an independent sentencing audit and voluntary temporary suspension from criminal trial assignments pending review." Gasps. Reporters scribbled furiously. Outside, Malcolm watched the live stream beside Gabriel. Neither spoke. Inside, the committee debated. Some defended him. Others saw opportunity to distance themselves. Politics moved quickly. By evening, his suspension was approved pending investigation. He walked out without escort. No gavel, no bench, just a man leaving a building he had once defined. At the warehouse, Asha refreshed the newsfeed. She didn't celebrate. She knew this was only phase one, because exposure destabilizes, but systems rebuild. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, a photo attachment, a much younger Adrian Hale at a scholarship gala, standing beside a senior senator, the same senator now chairing the Judicial Oversight Committee. Caption beneath the image: "Architects protect their own." Asha stared at it, then forwarded it to Hale. Moments later, his phone vibrated. He opened the image slowly and understood. This wasn't just about biased case routing. It went higher. Donor influence, appointment negotiations, quiet agreements made decades ago. He had been elevated not just for merit, but for alignment. The system had not merely used him, it had shaped him. He typed one message back to Asha. "How deep?" Her reply came instantly. "Deep enough that stepping down won't fix it." That night, Malcolm visited him. No cameras, no headlines, just father and son sitting across a kitchen table. "You gonna fight?" Malcolm asked. "I don't know yet." "If you don't," Malcolm said quietly, "they'll replace you with someone less conflicted." And nothing changes. Gabriel leaned against the doorway. "You always told juries intent matters. What's yours?" Hale looked at both of them. Two lives he hadn't raised, two men who understood the cost of invisibility better than he ever had. "My intent," he said slowly, "is to stop being useful to a broken structure." Silence, heavy, honest. The next morning he called a press conference, not to defend himself, not to resign quietly, but to release the emails publicly, every one, case routing strategies, statistical breakdowns, correspondence linking prosecutors to political offices. He named names, including the senator. The city erupted. Some called it betrayal, others called it courage. The Oversight Committee accelerated impeachment proceedings. Police unions demanded investigation into judicial misconduct. Activists rallied in support. The narrative fractured beyond control. Late that evening, another envelope arrived at his door. No return address. Inside, a single newspaper clipping from decades ago. Headline: "Clerkship candidate Hale distances from radical defender." Beneath it, handwritten, "You chose the bench, now choose the people." He sat with that for a long time, because this was no longer about sons, or reputation, or even justice inside one courtroom. It was about whether power can unlearn itself. "Tell me something." If you discover you were designed to stabilize injustice, is dismantling it redemption? Or is it just another performance? And if you were in his position, would you burn the structure knowing it might collapse on you first? Because the oversight vote happens in 48 hours, and someone just filed a motion to disbar him entirely. The system is deciding whether to erase him. The question is, will he let it? The motion to disbar him landed before sunrise. No warning, no courtesy call. Just a legal document uploaded into the public record like a blade left in plain sight. Judge Adrian Hale read it once, then again. The language was precise, surgical. Conduct unbecoming. Failure to maintain impartiality. Public release of confidential communications undermining institutional trust. Institutional trust. The phrase felt hollow now. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered before the doors even opened. Two crowds, two truths. One group held signs calling him a traitor to law enforcement. Another called him the first honest judge in decades. He walked between them without stopping. Inside, whispers followed him like echoes. Some colleagues avoided eye contact. Others nodded almost imperceptibly. Silent solidarity or silent warning, he couldn't tell. In the hearing chamber, the oversight committee sat elevated behind a long, curved bench. No robes, just suits. Power disguised as procedure. Senator William Klein sat at the center. The same man from the photograph Asha sent. The man who had once praised Hale publicly as a model of judicial balance. Now his expression was neutral, carefully neutral. Judge Hale, Klein began, voice calm, your recent actions have created unprecedented disruption. The question before us is simple. Did you act ethically? Simple questions are rarely simple. Hale stood alone at the podium. No legal team, no prepared speech. I acted transparently. That is not the same as ethically, another committee member replied. He nodded. Perhaps not. But secrecy had already corrupted the process. Murmurs rippled. The prosecutor's office submitted statements accusing him of undermining active cases. Police unions submitted affidavits calling him biased. Civil rights organizations submitted letters praising his courage. The room felt less like a hearing and more like a battlefield. Evelyn Cross testified next. She walked to the stand without hesitation. You were part of the rooting strategy, Klein said. I documented it, she corrected. Did you encourage Judge Hale's actions? No. Did you anticipate them? A pause. Yes. The word landed heavily. Why? Another member asked. Because once someone understands how they've been used, they either retreat into denial or confront it publicly. Judge Hale doesn't strike me as someone who retreats. Some committee members exchanged glances. Hale watched her carefully. She wasn't defending him. She was defending truth. Asha Coleman testified after. She brought the warehouse archive with her, not physically but digitally. Data patterns, sentencing statistics, comparative charts showing disparities across different judges. Hale's numbers weren't extreme. That was the point. He had been consistent enough to look fair, predictable enough to be manipulated, neutrality as leverage. The phrase echoed again. Neutrality can be weaponized. The hearing stretched for hours. You look tired, he said. I am. You. You look tired, he said. I am. You regret it? Hale thought about it honestly. No, but I regret how long it took. Gabriel joined them. You're not fighting like a judge anymore, he said. How am I fighting? Like someone who finally has skin in the game. That unsettled him. Because Gabriel wasn't wrong. Back inside, the senator leaned forward. Judge Hale, did your relationship to defendants Malcolm Reyes and Gabriel Soto influence your decisions? Yes. Gasps. He didn't soften it. They forced me to examine assumptions I had not previously questioned. That influenced my understanding. It did not dictate specific rulings. In the document release, I released evidence of systemic manipulation. If that undermines institutional trust, perhaps the institution should examine why. The room tightened. The vote would come by evening. Outside, media speculation exploded. Would he be removed? Would he resign before the decision? Inside, he sat alone, waiting. Time moved strangely when identity is on trial. He remembered Elena Reyes, Talia Coleman, all the conversations where women had warned him about the illusion of neutrality. He had listened, but he hadn't understood. Not until now. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. A video attachment. He hesitated, opened it. Old footage. Security camera inside the legal aid clinic decades ago. Young Adrian Hale laughing with Elena. Young Talia arguing passionately. And behind them, barely visible, Senator Klein speaking quietly with a donor. The audio was faint, but clear enough. He's the one. Balanced enough to keep both sides comfortable. The video ended. A message beneath. They chose you before you chose yourself. His breath slowed. He finally understood. He wasn't just shaped by the system. He had been selected to stabilize it. The vote began shortly after. Each committee member spoke. Some criticized his breach of protocol. Others praised his transparency. Klein spoke last. Judge Hale's actions represent a dangerous precedent. Judges must remain above personal entanglements. The irony almost made him laugh. The vote tally appeared on the screen. Disbarment motion. Failed by 1 vote. Gasps erupted. Instead, the committee imposed suspension and ordered a comprehensive external review. He remained a judge, but no longer untouchable. Outside, cameras surged. Questions fired like bullets. "Do you consider this a victory?" He paused. "No," he said quietly. "It's an admission." "Of what?" "The justice is not a destination, it's a correction." That night, he returned to the warehouse. Asha looked up as he entered. "Well, I'm still here." She nodded slowly. "That means they're betting you'll burn out. Or that I'll fix enough to quiet things." "And will you?" He thought about the video, the donor, the senator, the invisible architecture beneath every courtroom. "No," he said finally. "I think I'll make it louder." She smiled for the first time. Not warmth, recognition. Because systems rarely fear opposition. They fear exposure that refuses to stop. He turned toward the wall of faces again. Hundreds now. He realized something then. The third child wasn't a person. It was accountability. And accountability, once born, doesn't disappear. Tell me something. If a system survives by convincing good people they are neutral, what happens when those people stop believing it? And if you were given the power to expose everything, would you risk becoming the villain in someone else's story? Because tomorrow, a federal investigation begins, and the first person they plan to question is him. The federal investigators did not knock. They arrived. Black SUVs, dark suits, no press conference, just presence. By noon, the courthouse felt smaller than it ever had. Judge Adrian Hale sat in a private conference room across from 2 federal attorneys and a recorder placed deliberately between them. "Judge Hale," the lead investigator began, "we're examining potential corruption tied to prosecutorial routing and judicial influence. We need to understand how deep this goes." He didn't ask for a lawyer. That surprised them. "You think I orchestrated it?" Hale said calmly. "We think you benefited from it." That landed harder, because it was true. He had benefited from reputation, from stability, from quiet endorsements that made appointments smooth. Even if he hadn't known the mechanics, he had lived inside the protection. They slid a file toward him, subpoenaed communications, donor meetings, strategic recommendations linking Senator Klein to judicial selection committees. And buried deeper, emails suggesting specific sentencing tendencies were used to maintain institutional balance. Balance, such a clean word for control. "You were predictable," the investigator said. "That made you valuable." Hale exhaled slowly. "I thought predictability meant fairness. It meant reliability." Silence settled. "Are you willing to testify against the selection board?" the investigator asked. There it was, the real question. Not about sons, not about sentencing, about loyalty. Burn the structure completely, or let it survive with minor fractures. He thought about Malcolm, about Gabriel, about Asha's wall of faces, about Elena's warning decades ago. You can't fix what you refuse to see. "I will testify," he said. The room shifted. "Fully?" the investigator pressed. "Fully." Word travels fast in power circles. By evening, calls came, old colleagues urging caution, quiet reminders about legacy, warnings that federal investigations don't stop at one person. "You'll bring down the bench," one former mentor said over the phone. "If the bench is built on manipulation," Hale replied, "maybe it should come down." That night, he sat alone again. But it felt different now. Not like collapse, like transition. Malcolm arrived without calling. "You're going through with it," he said. "Yes. You understand they'll drag everything out? Your old cases, your rulings, your personal life." "I do." Gabriel stood behind him. "And if they find something?" Hale didn't hesitate. "Then I answer for it." Silence. Then Malcolm asked the question that had lingered since the beginning. "Why now?" Hale looked at them. "Because the first time I saw you in that courtroom, I realized I had spent my life believing I was separate from the consequences of my decisions." He swallowed once. "I was wrong." The federal testimony lasted 3 days. Closed session, explosive content, names were named, documents authenticated, patterns confirmed. Within weeks, Senator Klein announced retirement. 2 senior prosecutors resigned. A judicial appointment review board was suspended pending overhaul. The headlines were chaotic. Some called it a purge. Others called it progress. Hale remained suspended throughout, his future uncertain. One afternoon, Asha invited him back to the warehouse. The projector now showed fewer red highlights, cases under review, convictions reopened, not erased, reviewed. "That's not revolution," Hale said quietly. "No," Asha replied. "It's correction." Correction! The word had followed him from the hearing. Maybe justice was not a final state. Maybe it was constant recalibration. Weeks later, the Oversight Committee reconvened. This time, with federal findings in hand, the motion wasn't about disbarment anymore. It was about reinstatement under new oversight structures. The vote was close again. But this time, the room felt different. Less political, more cautious. The result appeared on screen. Reinstated, conditional oversight, mandatory transparency protocols, external review authority. He would return to the bench, but not as the same symbol. Outside, the press waited. "Judge Hale, are you redeemed?" He paused. "No." "Vindicated?" "No." "Then what are you?" He looked past the cameras, past the noise, toward Malcolm and Gabriel standing quietly behind the crowd. "I am accountable." The word felt heavier than any title. Months passed. The courtroom reopened under new policies, mandatory evidence audits, randomized case assignments, independent review observers. Not perfect. Never perfect, but harder to manipulate. The first case he presided over upon return involved a young defendant charged with resisting arrest. The courtroom held its breath. Hale listened carefully, asked sharper questions, demanded clearer documentation, not softer, not harsher, just more awake. After adjournment, he stepped down from the bench and noticed something subtle. The gallery didn't look divided, it looked watchful. And maybe that was better. Later that evening, Malcolm joined him for dinner. Gabriel arrived late, carrying takeout. They sat at the same kitchen table where everything had shifted. "You think it's fixed?" Gabriel asked. "No," Hale said honestly. "You think it's better?" "Yes." Malcolm leaned back. "You know you're never going to be neutral again." Hale almost smiled. "I don't think I ever was." Silence followed, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was reflective. The phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. He stared at it, then ignored it. Some loops don't need reopening. Outside, the city kept moving. Cases continued. Arguments raged. Justice adjusted. And somewhere in a warehouse across town, a wall of faces began to shrink. Tell me something. If justice requires personal awakening to evolve, does that mean fairness was always waiting for someone to care enough? And if you were placed inside a system designed before you arrived, would you question it? Or would you let it define you quietly? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The system doesn't change when villains fall. It changes when insiders decide to stop being useful. And the next judge rising through the ranks is watching very carefully.